Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Hello. Welcome to Beyond Broke. My name is Ivan Salinas, and I'm the programs coordinator here at Beyond Broke. Buenas noches. It's an honor to present tonight's event with dos grandes poetas, escritores, Javier Zamora and Christopher Soto. In just a minute, you'll be hearing from them, but before we get started, just a few words about Beyond Broke. First, I'd like to acknowledge our presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino Tongva peoples. We acknowledge the wrong done to these peoples through settler colonialism and genocidal practices. And as an arts organization, we are committed to uplifting Indigenous communities, their stories, and cultures. We're a nonprofit dedicated to the possibilities of language, offering readings, writing workshops, and gallery exhibitions year-round. Later this month, we'll be hosting True Tales of Family, a reading and panel discussion with 5 Macondistas, including Pat Alderete and Ellison Hedgecock, and other fellows of the Macondo Writers Workshop. Their memoirs explore how writing can be transformative when writing about family history and coping with trauma. And on October 7th, we'll be having a poetry project 1521, reading from their anthology Tlacuilex, Tongues in Quarantine, an anthology reacting to 500 years of mestizaje in the Americas. We also have intensive and experience-related workshops with Tracy Kato Kirayama and Tisha Aguilera, and you can find more of that in our website, and Tisha is right here with us. So sign up for her workshop. And be on the lookout on November 20th for November 18th through the 20th for the 4th installment of the Southern California Poetry Festival. We'll be putting out announcements very soon. And we have a very exciting lineup for that. Also, if you'd like to become a Beyond Broke member, please see Jessica Wong in the bookstore. You would get free access to ticketed events and other perks, as well as you'd be supporting our mission in continuing to provide programming that's free and accessible to the community. This time of year, we're celebrating and at the same time mourning our history for those who may self-identify as Latinx, Latine, Indigenous, people of color. So it means a lot to be able to provide a space for more voices and stories like the ones we'll hear today to be amplified and recognized, especially here in one of the oldest literary institutions of Los Angeles with over 50 years of history. This building specifically used to be the old Venice City Hall building. And when they decided to move, poets took it over in about 1979. And since then, it's been home to writers like Wanda Coleman, Amy Gersler, Scott Wannenberg, Ellie Beats, and many more. Now even Christopher Soto and Javier Zamora. And one of the first readings here was actually an event held in Spanish, and it was called Flores para Nicaragua. And it was an event that former director Manasar Gamboa decided to host here. And it was in aid of the revolutionary overtake that was happening at that time. So it's an honor to be part of that legacy of welcoming contemporary writers to the space. And I want to give a huge thank you to our current team, starting off with Beyond Broke's Assistant Director, Jimmy Vega, Executive Director, Quentin Ring. Thank you, yeah. Please show him some love, and as well to Jessica Wong, our bookstore publicity intern, Eric in the sound booth. They're all making this event possible. Lastly, I now welcome Javier y Christopher aquí a Los Angeles. Esta es su casa, and especially to Javier, who had just released this beautiful memoir, Solito. It's inspiring, and it's honestly one story that is very personal, that has impacted me at a personal level as someone who crossed the border, sin papeles, just 10 years old, and it was a trip that was supposed to take 3 days, and it took almost a month. It really really means a lot for you to be here and to have this honor to present it. And just know that like your story, it really is impacting Salvadoreños, Guatemaltecos, Hondureños, Mexicanos, Catrachos, Bichos that are on this journey and also are celebrating our cultura. Publishing is activism, and more undocumented or formerly undocumented writers' voices need to be heard. We're calling for dignidad literaria, and that time has come. So thanks to you and to Christopher for all for all the work organizing in the movement. Gracias, en verdad. And I think without further ado, just the last thing I want to say is their bio. First, Christopher Soto. Born in 1991, he is a poet based in Los Angeles, California. His debut poetry collection, Diaries of a Terrorist, was published by Copper Canyon Press. This collection demands the abolition of policing and human caging. He was honored with DAM's 2022 Now Award in Literature for representing the cutting edge of queer culture. And Javier Zamora. Javier was born in El Salvador in 1990. When he was 9, Javier emigrated through Guatemala, Mexico, and the Sonoran Desert. His debut poetry collection, Unaccompanied, explores the impact of the war and immigration on his family, and is now the author of the memoir Solito. Zamora has been a Stegner Fellow at Stanford and a Radcliffe Fellow at Harvard, and holds fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Poetry Foundation. Please welcome Javier Zamora.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Gracias, Loma, for thinking of this beautiful place. And thank you, Beyond Baroque, for hosting me. And I've never been here, and I'm just awed. And it's a true honor. And I guess I'll begin by reading just a short excerpt, and I'll start by reading from the end of chapter 1, which the short spiel is that the book is told from my 9-year-old self. I was born in a small coastal town in the middle of El Salvador. If you've flown into El Salvador, you've flown over my house. And so my dad leaves in 1991, the year before the Civil War ends. Civil War happens 1980, 1992. He leaves 1991. Then my mom leaves in the aftermath of 1995. And they leave me with my grandparents and my aunts, Mali and Lupe. And then once we gather enough funds, my mom pays the same person that brought her over here in 1995. That coyote was a trusted coyote. She made it here in 14 days. And if I could use the word safe, it was relatively safe. And so they thought that they were paying him for the exact same service. And the 2 weeks end up being 2 months. And the book begins with weeks before my last day at home, but I'm going to read from my departure, which is on April 6, 1999. It's dawn, indigo, like when mom left. Mali kisses me awake, and I have to get ready. The roosters crow, La Bonita barks, the birds sing, the world is waking up. The stars turn off one by one. To shower, I pull water from a well with a bucket. Grandpa already showered. Abuelita drives me off. Mali irons my clothes. The outfit has been picked out. A nice dress shirt, dark blue jeans, a black belt, black dress shoes. Next to the hard-boiled eggs, avocado, queso duro, and tortillas, a black backpack. Even the brand name has been crossed out. Inside it, a dark t-shirt, black pants, 2 pairs of underwear, an extra pair of shoes, the plastic toothbrush, a comb, soccer shorts, Colgate toothpaste, a bar of palm olive soap, Head and Shoulders shampoo, and another dark blue short-sleeved dress shirt. There's a notebook, Bic, pens, pencils, and the assignments my teachers gave me. Everything has to be dark colors, Mali explains. The coyote's orders. I eat, and Grandpa waits by the door, holding my black backpack and his own regular one. He looks at his watch. Abuelita combs my hair. Mali kneels in front of me to button my shirt. She tucks it in, kisses my forehead. Lupe is here, the earliest I've seen her come visit. She hugs me, kisses me, wishes me luck. Julia is sleeping in Abuelita's bed between two pillows to keep her from falling. Abuelita kisses me, kneels to hug me. Then Mali and Abuelita hug me at the same time. Only now I cry. This is it. The thing I wanted to happen, but it's happening so fast. Te queremos mucho, Chepito. Te cuidas. Que Dios te bendiga here, everywhere, always. We'll be waiting for you, praying you'll make it there safely, Javiercito. Their voices almost in unison, soft, breaking with every word, tears running down their round faces. I can't stop crying. Then they make the cross over my forehead, over my head, over my entire body, wiping my tears with their hands. Grandpa grabs my arm, walks me past the door. Don't look back, he says. But I do. I see Abuelita and Mali in the middle of the door holding each other. Lupe has a hand on each of their shoulders. Come on, Grandpa says, and we walk. Gracias.
Some more, everybody. We will do a brief change here in our setup to welcome Christopher and Javier in conversation. So give us a few minutes and we'll be back.
So professional. Yeah, that's good. It's so professional. Yeah.
Hello, test.
Hello, hello.
Test. I don't know if mine's working.
It's not.
No.
Are they on?
Hello.
Yeah.
Hey, Jude.
Same.
Okay, now I think it's working. Okay. All right, great. Gracias a Beyond Baroque. Thank you for having us and everyone here for coming to. We're 10 years into, maybe a little more into our friendship now. We started at NYU where we were both doing our MFA in poetry. So it's nice to still be able to write and to be able to celebrate you and this book. We're gonna have a conversation for the next 40 minutes or so. We'll leave some room for also people in the audience to ask us questions as well. And our conversation is gonna zigzag a little bit from contemporary Salvadorian politics to migration to literary craft. Cool? All right, great. So let's start.
Let's do it.
The first question I have over here for you is, can you tell us a bit about politics in El Salvador and what's going on there at the moment? Why is it important to know?
Shit, it's fucked up. There was a brief moment there. So I had to self-deport, for lack of a better term, in 2018 because I was up for this extraordinary abilities visa, which is how I got my papers. But I had to self-deport because I came here the way that I did, and I couldn't interview at a U.S. embassy or consulate here, so I had to go back there and do the whole thing as if I hadn't been living in the United States for 19 years. And I went back. 2017 was the peak of the murder rates in my country. At one point, we were only behind Afghanistan, and who was at war, and it was higher than Syria, who was also at war. And then I go there in 2018, and I don't go to San Salvador. I go to the rural area that is controlled by MS-13. And I know it's getting live streamed, but fuck it. If you're in politics in my country, everybody knows that you have to be involved in other things. And that is precisely what's happening, what has happened, and what will continue to happen. There's a lot of corruption, and we have a dictator. I'm gonna use that term because he needs to hear it. He's a dictator. And the hardest part about having the privilege to go back to El Salvador, which I'm the only person in my family that can do that, and then having to translate what life is over there to my family members who haven't been back. My mom since 1995, my aunt since 2003 and 2005 and 15, is that they're deep into Facebook, and Bukele is really good at using the media. So my aunts are very hardcore Bukelistas. Like how I've found a lot of Salvis who are immigrants are as well, because they just hear that crime rate is down, like the same crime rate that I just used, but they don't realize that this guy is disappearing people, innocent people, and incarcerating activists. And it is not safe for us still to this day. And I don't know. Did I forget something?
No, but I think one of the things that I also want to do to contextualize, since we are in the United States, is the risk of what you just said, because I don't know if that necessarily is registerable or identifiable to American audience. So at this particular moment, there's a state of exception in El Salvador, and there is a lot of, and the state of exception means that constitutional rights are stripped and people can be arbitrarily arrested and detained. And there are people who are tortured, go missing, and killed in prisons in El Salvador in this moment.
There is a, if you go, there is a commercial that comes on almost hourly, multiple times an hour, that gives you a phone number to call that you can call in if you suspect people of being in the gangs. This phone number has gotten misused. For example, there are, in my hometown, there are people who are mad or another person, and they just call this number, and then the secret police or the police themselves go and show up, and without questions, they take that person and jail them. So this is what's happening. Yeah.
And so why I wanted to contextualize this, because even now as we're talking, I'm like, I've implicated myself.
Yeah.
And because both of us still go back to El Salvador pretty frequently. And what this means is that now we are on the record for speaking about one, gangs, the government, freedom of press, and policing. So these are things that in this particular moment in Salvadorian politics are not without risk. It's playing with fire. And so when Javier, even though you're part of the diaspora and you're writing a book about migration, like to talk about it's playing with fire. There's risk because the place that we're migrating from is currently experiencing a very turbulent political government. So how do you address the root causes of migration, which are, yes, poverty, but also gang violence, also political corruption, also XYZ reasons, without endangering yourself in this particular moment? So I kind of just wanted to build that context around the fact that this isn't just like some hero story, like, yay, this kid made it to the US, but your actual process of writing and living and speaking about migration from El Salvador is one that in a country that's the size of Massachusetts does possibly put eyes on you. And if the thing with artists and with dissidents is it's that possibility, which is a scary part, which is what I face when I go back as well.
I guess at the back of my mind, I still think that Bukele doesn't read, and he certainly. Damn, I'm going hard on Bukele. Huh? That
We're gonna have to go to Guatemala
I
next
know,
time.
I don't know that I compare this to like I was so afraid of having my book of poems out during the Trump administration. And I was so afraid because I still didn't have papers and in the writing of it. And the funniest quote that somebody said is like, well, you never had a Border Patrol agent show up at your readings. I'm like, no, not yet. I'm like, because the Border Patrol probably doesn't read poetry. And so that hasn't happened. I think I'm still very naive. Maybe he will watch this. I don't know. But I don't want to be afraid to speak my piece, and I think someone has to do it. And I don't know.
There's
in a weird way, it was, and this is like the absurdities that we have to balance, right? In my town, the first time that I went back, I've gone back 5 times. The first time I was super afraid. I didn't even leave my home. I have tattoos and I was afraid to like walk around shirtless. The second time was a little less. And then by the third, I realized, and this is my cousin has stayed over there. She's 5 years younger than me. And she's like, well, I went to school with all the people that control, meaning the gangsters that control this part of town. And they've never done anything to me and they respect our grandparents and they're not going to do anything. So I was like, okay. And they're like, if you're with me, they're not going to do anything to you. Okay, cool. And so now, like third, fourth time, I would walk from where I live to the center of town. People recognize me. Nothing bad has happened. But now it's different. Mm-hmm. Now it's a politician. It's not the people that my cousins grew up with who don't know me. They don't know her. And there's that dissonance. Mm-hmm. And I guess danger. I don't know. I am writing in English. I guess there's that. But yeah, I haven't really thought about this.
I have. I just got back from El Salvador, I think last week or maybe 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm always like, I'm not that worried about the gangs when I go because I stay in Escalon, which is like the Beverly Hills of El Salvador.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like out there with my purse and my vegan donuts and hanging out.
Which I didn't even know there were vegan donuts in El Salvador.
Yeah, because the imagination of El Salvador becomes ghettoized as if like the whole nation doesn't also experience, as if there isn't class there as well.
Yeah.
And so my experiences with El Salvador are largely like hiking volcanoes, black sand beaches, dancing with friends.
Yeah. Those are not my
But
experiences.
yeah, because, and we are read different in El Salvador as well, racially, class-wise, geographically. We have very different experiences.
Yeah.
But this time being back during the state of exception, my neck is tattooed, my hands are tattooed. Even when I'm in Escalon in the Fresa supermarkets, like the guards looked at me and I was like, white girl accent. I was like, Dylan, where's the piece? Like, so I was trying to flag for them really quick. But there's two things that you said that I kind of also I thought were smart and wanted to contextualize. One of the things that you did was you talked about risk within the United States while you were undocumented here and publishing unaccompanied, right? So I think that was a really beautiful comment, because what you did there was you pushed against the idea that America is safe, it is exceptional, you can be a writer here without risk. And that was a moment where you said, yes, there's risk in speaking about the government in El Salvador now, but when I was writing poems about being undocumented in the United States, they were quick to, there's also the possibility of risk there. And that risk is not necessarily any safer, because if you get deported into that country that we just, in that political climate that we just described, that is also very dangerous. And that's happening to a lot of people on behalf of the US government now. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about the relationship between migration and detention in this particular moment.
Where my head goes is that had I written a memoir first, I would not have qualified for papers, because I would have been accepting culpability. And my lawyers were glad. For example, Jose Antonio Vargas, who is still undocumented, he came out as undocumented through the New York Times. And because he did that, he has a Pulitzer, he has all these national awards, but because he wrote nonfiction about it, he could never get the visa that I got. But I got that visa because under the court of law, poetry is fiction. And so without knowing that, there was less of a risk that I perceived in the eyes of an immigration official. Now, and I haven't given this answer, but I wrote this in the present tense and not the third person. I tried it first, but I think I hit a wall because I was thinking about this risk that I knew. My lawyers hate that this is out before I'm up for citizenship in 2 years. So they hate that I did this. Because if it's always up to one person, that's the fucked up thing about the immigration system in this country. If that one agent happens to have read this and thinks that a kid holds culpability, he could deny my citizenship. So there's a risk in that way. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's where my head went. That there is a risk here in writing, but I also want to say that the risk here and the risk in El Salvador are not the same. And having said that, I don't want to run the risk of suffering Olympics, but it's just a reality that if I were to have written the things that I have written in this country, I would have never become a poet in El Salvador. I would have to jump way too many hurdles. I'm from a poor rural town. I'm not from El Escalon. I'm not from San Salvador. Access to education is very difficult for my cousin, who still, every time she has to take a bus to the city to go to university, and she has gotten robbed countless of times, and this is still a reality. So I don't know.
Yeah. The other thing that also, for the record, I'm not from Escalon, but I do stay there. But fuck, now I'm like, I shouldn't have said that. Now they're gonna see the video, and now they're gonna be looking for me on the streets of Escalon. Like, damn, I fucking hate this the state of exception. All right, but the thing that I was thinking about as we're speaking is just like, I mean, neither of us would be writers in El Salvador. I'm writing about abolishing the police. And in the US, they gave me a NEA. The government gave me money for writing about abolishing the cops.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
In El Salvador, I'd probably be sent to prison if they would have read it. You
Yeah.
have writers, like a whole bunch of journalists and a whole bunch of writers who are not able to exist in the country right now
Who have
because
fled.
of persecution.
Yeah.
But beyond that, there's not the infrastructure and the economy to support a literary community where people can actually be paid a wage. And I think that's one of the interesting things, is that you have even the middle class artists who want to flee for leave the country for opportunity. But I wanted to comment on like your I wanted to comment just on kind of the impossibility of writing this book, because there's all of those like structural state issues, whether it be in El Salvador or it be in the US, that make writing this book risky or at risk. But then there's also the things that are beside the state. There's like a white supremacist literary culture, whether it's the agents, whether it's the editors, whether it's like
Publishing houses.
the publishing houses, the publicist, the journalist. Like, I've had journalists straight up tell me, like, your work is amazing, I have no idea how to talk about it. You know. And so it's like, even with someone as phenomenal as you, there's still a million guardrails that are, or gates that are just pushed up right against your face. So how do you navigate that impossibility as well?
For me, it's also how I internalized all those things. From the ages of 9 until 29, when I sat down and began to write this book, I was for lack of a better word, self-policing. I was running away from the trauma. I was ashamed of that 9-year-old kid. And I didn't want to write this because I had believed what the media has told us immigrants in this country is that we are criminals and that we are shameful for what we've done, and that you shouldn't tell anybody what you've lived through because you are deportable if you do, and we're going to judge you if you share this story. So even before I got to the desk, I couldn't go there. And that's just internally speaking. And then on top of that, you know, I was trying to live in New York City, thinking that I needed to live in New York City in order to be a writer. Mm-hmm. I am not the best at playing the popularity game. I don't have, like, you're one of my few literary friends, because I don't like the bullshit. Sometimes it feels,
and all
like
of our friends have 3 friends.
Yeah.
None of us have friends.
And,
we're all losers.
So sometimes it feels like you're in high school and, you know, at lunch, and there's like the cool kids table, and then you have to like say X, Y, and Z, or be published in X, Y, and Z in order to sit at that table. And I've always been a loner. Like, from the CV, you can see that I've gotten X, Y, and Z, but I think because of my trauma, rarely do I ask for help, and I've never shared my work with anybody else. That's how deep the trauma is, because I don't trust anybody. And I've been mistrustful up until I started to write this shit, and I couldn't have written this without a therapist who is also an immigrant, a child immigrant herself from the DR, who I could really trust for the first time. Because I've had therapists since I was in 7th grade, but only one of them has been Latinx, and none of them have been immigrants. I think I needed my therapist to be a Latinx immigrant woman in order for me to trust her and do the work that it took me to get here. This is a book that I needed to write for myself, and in order to survive, I was struggling. I was very toxic. If you've known me before, you can see that I would like, let's go out to a bar and like stay there until like 4 a.m. and then I would like maybe make it home. That's how much I was internally struggling. And I think I was struggling because of all the structures that you just described. And we have to carry that.
Mhm.
And it got to a point where I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna share it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's like, then you share it. And then these, at least in our cases, more so yours, has been like, good job. Like immigrants can make it. Like, and it's just, if I don't know, it sometimes feels like, okay, I gotta celebrate. I made it. I have to celebrate this now too. But it's like this weird dichotomy
Dissonance.
of like, I was not writing this to be included in this space.
Yeah.
I was not writing this, we were talking shit earlier. Well, I'm always talking shit on everyone, but about the Amazon billboard in Times Square.
Yeah.
And it's like that sort of juxtaposition where you're like, fucking cool. This is a signifier that means I made it. Like my book is on a billboard of Times Square. But this is the heart of capitalism. This is the heart, it's the Amazon billboard,
Yeah.
which funds child separation.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do I, yay,
Yeah.
and like,
Yeah.
how do I hold that? And sometimes it just feels like to write, it's like you don't write and you disappear, or you write and you disappear. It's almost like a constant act of
You're always disappearing. I think I struggled with my first book, Unaccompanied, with this very problem, because now I guess we're not talking about Amazon, which but back then we were talking about the Poetry Foundation, who is funded by Big Pharma. We're talking about the National Endowment for the Arts, which is still the government, who I've been recognized by, and I didn't have the outlet, so I just felt, for lack of a better term, survivor's guilt. Why do I deserve this? I don't deserve this. I still don't have papers for a lot of those awards. I didn't, and so I would be put on a stage almost as like an example of like, look, you speak for us. I'm like, no, I just want to speak about me, or like for me, to myself. And I've done a lot of work with my therapist, and I've been in the middle of like in the borderlands. I live in Tucson now. I'm not a big city person after all. I always thought that I was. And that has been very healing for me. I try not to go on social media. I don't post that much. Now I'm just like reposting stuff. I rarely do I like actually craft something, because it's very, I don't know. I don't like that exposure. Or I'm very personal, even though I'm telling you one of the most personal things that ever happened to me. But there's also a level of control. I control what I'm telling you. And for the most part, I have had a publicity team, one of them whom is Salvadoran of all things, and a lot of them get it in the United States. I think I'm very fortunate that the book came out after everything that happened before around other people writing for immigrants or about immigrants. So I'm very fortunate that occurred. And so there's that. It could be worse. My book, I've struggled with the UK printing. The British don't understand what Salvadorans are, and Janelle might disagree with me, or maybe reinforce this idea, but they wanted to write in the book flap. They wanted to say, "Oh, this is a story about a little kid who first learned who had their first taco." I was like, what the fuck? Like, no, that's not what the book is about. It's not about me. And because for them, the publicists over there in Britain, they're like, oh, well, that's how the audience is going to really understand this story. I'm like, really? Through tacos? Because you understand Mexicanness, but not Salvadoranness? So I don't know. I went off. But I don't know. I rambled, and I don't know if I'm even answering it. But it's I just take time to really talk to the internal me, and this is the internal me is this 9-year-old kid who this trauma, I now understand that this kid is going to be with me for the rest of my life, when beforehand I thought that I could just hide him and not think about him, and that he was going to go away. And having this out, I can honor that. I've done it, and now I can think about something else.
And to talk a little bit more about young migrants or migrant youth or people who are migrating right now, I know that you're doing some work with some organizations in Arizona as well. What are the needs that you see for current folks who are migrating from El Salvador?
Well, now it's mostly Venezuelans and Colombians and Cubans and Nicaraguans just this summer. And actually through the corridor, so I live in Tucson. I help whenever I can. I'm also writing something that it's very draining. I found out for me to be around other survivors, other immigrants. I can do it now because of therapy, and it won't re-trigger me, but it completely drains me. I have to take at least 3 weeks off after I go to Sasabe, in the US, and the Mexican side, which this woman, Dora Rodriguez, if you don't know this organization, Salva Visión, please donate. And if you can volunteer, salvavision.org. A lot of these organizations are also not led by immigrants themselves, but this one is, and it's led by the sweetest 411 Salvi woman who ran out of water in 1980, and a lot of the group that she was with died in the same stretch of desert that I ran out of water in 1999, and I almost died. And it's the same stretch of desert that she's the only person who has a resource center in that stretch of corridor that has no resource center because it's controlled by the cartels. And now when I immigrated, you could still see, and I hope that you understand that there were coyotes who actually cared and wanted to bring people here safely. Now we, the cartels, have figured out that immigrants are money signs, and so they don't care. And there are cases where the coyotes literally just help them jump over the fence and then tell them that there's going to be somebody waiting on the other side, and there's nobody there. And I've been driving and people have to stop our car because Border Patrol is not stopping for them. This is during the Biden administration because they didn't want to rack up numbers. So I've had to pull over my car and wait with these immigrants who, and until we were there, Border Patrol shows up and you know, they give them water and medicals, because if we put them in our car, then that's a federal crime. So anyways, it's very difficult work. People are still immigrating. For the most part, all they need are shoes. They need shoes, they need clothes, they need a place to shower, which this resource centers is the only place where they can shower. Because if not, they fall back into the cartel's hands. And so if that's literal, it's very minimal, but all they need are, during COVID, we were giving them like the shit that sanitizer, gloves, toothbrushes, tampons, pads. That's very crucial, and that's not readily available in the borderlands.
Yeah, and this last time I was talking to a friend who does violence prevention work in El Salvador. This last time I was there, and we're always in the ship, and she was talking about people who've been recently deported, and then they end up, you know, back in El Salvador. Some people without knowing El Salvador, or having social familial networks there. And if you're deporting someone, the idea, I guess, from the nation state would be that you're reintroducing them to their country and you would like them to stay there. In order for someone to stay, they have to feel like they have purpose, they have home, they have community, they have opportunity. But my friend was telling me, she was talking to people who had been recently deported, and she was telling me the story of someone who, she asked, what do you need when you return to El Salvador? And she thought that he was going to answer and say the long-term things, housing, job, etc. And his answer was shoelaces.
Yeah.
And I'll be walking around the streets these days thinking shoelaces.
Yeah.
And the reason he said that is because in the United States, before deporting people, they're stripping them of their shoelaces.
Yeah.
So not only when they land in El Salvador, do they not have the house? Do they not, I'm gonna get fucking mad. Do they not have, the resources they need? Bitches don't have shoelaces to walk to the home that is not their home. They do not have their belts. And so if people don't have the shoelaces, the belts, their water, how do you expect them, US government, to create a new home once you deport them?
Yeah.
But I also wanted,
this is a good plug for also Salvavicion. It's this woman has also figured this part out. She, for the recently deported, she has established a center. She's from Santa Ana, in Santa Ana, and also
that's
a center.
where my family's from. Put that on the record.
Also a center in a city in Honduras, because at that time a lot of Hondureños were coming from that town, and she offers them a job. It could be as little as like making little bracelets, making bags that then they send to her, because she makes these trips. She brings them to the United States, and at the event she sells those, and it's immigrants who are been deported or have family members who are thinking of coming over, and this is like a deterrence, because people don't want to come here. They want to stay in their homelands. And this, again, like this book also would not be possible without Dora Rodriguez, because here's this woman who since 1980, she almost died near Tucson. She had no family in the United States, but she decides to stay in Tucson and face the climate, face the place, the people that almost took her life. And on top of that, she becomes a social worker. And then she begins Salvavicion while she's still a social worker. And now she's retired. And every single day, 24/7, she has her phone ready, and she always picks up the phone. And she does and she's like a one-person shop. And I'm just in awe that she was never afraid to go there and face her trauma and help these immigrants. And that really showed me like, oh fuck, I can't keep hiding from this 9-year-old kid. If she can do it, I should finish this fucking book and do this.
One more thing that I wanted to talk about in relationship to like the material reality of migration / deportation is, we talked about coyote seeing people as dollar signs. Do you remember the exact money, the exact dollar amount right now that coyotes are? I'm trying to remember. I can't.
Right now it's more. It's when I immigrated here for a kid, they were charging $12,000, and now it's up just for an adult is 15,000 plus. So people take out these loans in order to have a chance of making it here. So they fall into deeper debt, and then if they get deported, they can't pay that debt, so they have to come back here.
So to put that in context, with El Salvador, the minimum wage around there is about $350 a month, which means that people in the campo, like in La Herradura, are making about $10 a day for their work. So when you go and you see the beautiful like coffee beans from El Salvador, those are hands that were working $10 a day in the sun.
But they have $30 in Bitcoin, so it's all good.
Yeah, fuck off, man. And so so that's a large amount that people are paying to migrate. All right, so I want to
should we last one and then maybe open it up?
I want to talk about transnational hero myth, geography, place and geography. I like this one. Is Carolyn Forche part of the CIA? He told me I wasn't allowed to ask that. Let me actually craft it. I want to think about place. I want to talk about that one offline. Everyone who knows me knows I love that question. I want to think about place and geography as it relates to the canon, in particular, the memoir or the Salvadorian literary canon, whether that's the literary canon as it exists in El Salvador, in the diaspora, a hybrid. How do you think about your work in relationship to this canon slash canons?
It's still a trip how many writers we have in a nation that's smaller than New York City, population wise, and smaller than Massachusetts without Cape Cod. So we are that small without Cape Cod. We have so many writers. I think it's something in the water or the volcanoes, or I don't fucking know. Maybe the morro in the horchata.
It's because our Mongo lips.
But we're a literary people. And just this year, you can see we're fucking going to the moon as well. Do you see? There's a Salvi going to the fucking moon. We are fucking everywhere. And we have a fiction short story collection whose long list is for the NBA. We have your book out. We have Janelle's book, Cynthia Guardado, I think you're here. You have another book. We have Raquel Gutierrez, Brown Neon, a queer essays. And we had Roberto Lobato write a memoir last year. We are writing, and this is just the beginning. Alex Regalado as well has a book coming out. We had the Washington State Poet Laureate is Salvi Castro Luna. We are literary people, and I think it's because of our oral traditions, our families who are learned, and everybody knows, at least, you know, my dad's generation, everybody knows Roque Dalton, and I wouldn't be here without Roque Dalton. I wouldn't be here without Manlio Argueta. Un Día de Vida. I read that, and it reads like a memoir. It's technically fiction, but it's based on true events, and it all takes place over one day. And I've been obsessed with that structure, that it kind of gave me the idea for this timeline. You know, it starts when I start the trip, and then it ends when I'm reunited with my parents. And so, yeah, I'm in conversation with everybody, and I hope, and I know that this book, your book, everybody in this room's books are helping the next generation. And it's also putting Central America on the map. You know, let's not be like gatekeepers as well. We're not the only Central American country. There are a lot of others, and their stories are coming, and let's help the Chapina story, the Catracha story, the Belizean story, the Nicaraguan story, and talking about immigration as well. I'm waiting for, you know, these Venezuelan kids who are coming over, the Colombian kids, you know.
Before we open it up, I want to be an agitator just a tiny bit more, because I realized you mentioned authors, contemporary Salvadorian authors in the diaspora, and a few that are historically in El Salvador. But I think within American publishing and media, when we think about Salvadorian literature, most people's ears go towards Carolyn Forche, or they go towards Didion. And there is like a white canon reflecting on El Salvador that oftentimes gets more hits and more plays and more attention.
I think that's changing. I think that is happened and has happened.
I mean, if you look at Forche's last book in relationship to mine, she gets more playtime to talk about El Salvador than me, and I live there.
Yeah. But it's changing. I think, you know, I hope that this, you know, the book is in the New York Times bestsellers list, and it is the second week. I think publishers hopefully see that we can also tell our own stories, and we have been telling our own stories, and we will continue to tell our own stories. And it's about time. It's about time also that we're not Mexican adjacent, even in shows. You know, I was watching This Fool, and in the first episode, we're still playing that trope. Oh no, I'm actually Salvadoran, fool. Like, no, man. Like, we can exist just being Salvadoran. And I think that's the next step. And I think it's happening. I think it's important to call out the past, but also to like, we have a rich fucking history and we have a rich present. And I'm quite sure that it's going to continue to flourish.
You're always sweeter than I am. All right, we'll take a couple questions in the audience. I see one person in front of me right here.
Great question. It's draining. I refuse to be the spokesperson for a people. I am not the spokesperson for all child immigrants. I'm not the spokesperson for all Salvadorans. I'm not. I can only speak about my own personal experiences. And if that helps people understand who I am, and great. But I never wanted to be, and I think that's the pressure of being categorized by other people, not yourself. And if you're always thinking about the audience or the white gaze, you never write anything, because we're talking about the white gaze here, that and white supremacy, that only consider us human once we've proven to be superhuman, more than human, which is what immigrants have to do. We have to do the superhuman in order to even get here. We have survived the unsurvivable, and yet we're here and we're thriving. And so I don't know. This is what I talk with my therapist about all the time. and it has really helped. And again, I would rather be the spokesperson to tell our communities to seek mental health than be the exceptional, like, oh my God, you have all this shit in your CV. Great, look at you. And I refuse and I reject the American dream. That's another, though what you asked and the American dream question go hand in hand. Fuck the American dream. It doesn't exist. And I like to say that I am a glitch in the system. I am not the system. This doesn't happen, and everywhere everybody tells us, oh, if you just work hard enough. Even our own parents have instilled that in us. Oh, but if you're in the United States, ¿qué estás haciendo? You have all these fucking opportunities. You're being lazy. You're not taking advantage of them. No, that's a completely wrong way of thinking about our existence in this country. I don't know.
Yeah, I like that. I'm a glitch in the system.
Yeah.
Because if you look at it from the individual standpoint, it's all like, okay, the American dream is possible. But if you think about collective liberation, like No.
Yeah.
All right, we'll take two more. I see one person in the front. Yeah.
My mom accepted my North California Poetry Award because I was in El Salvador. I had to. I was such a bad student that the school paid for it in Marin County. Not well. My dad still doesn't believe in therapy, even though I really want him to believe in therapy. My mom finally is back in therapy, and it has helped our relationship so much. Um, they support me 100%. I just had a lot of events in the Bay Area. They were at every single event. And the worst thing that happened was when my mom accepted the Northern California Book Award. A woman came up to her, and pretty much was telling her that she was a bad mom. And if you read this book, I absolutely would dissuade you from having that thought, because this is a mom that loved her kid, who wanted to be reunited with her kid, and it is a kid who wanted to be reunited with his mom. And I described my own trauma over the 9 weeks. I'm not a parent. I can't imagine what it would be like for a parent to not know where their kid is for 7 weeks. That's a trauma in and of itself. Even though they have their own immigration trauma, layer that on top of this, which is why for 20 years we couldn't talk about my trip. You know, whenever we tried or attempted to, they would cry. And for a lot of that, I was a bad student once the hormones kicked in, because I always asked this question: was it worth it? Were these 9 weeks worth me being in this country? That for a lot of those years, the answer is no. It has not been worth it. And another thing that us immigrants, when we don't have mental health, when we don't have a therapist, we equate love with materialistic things, and that hasn't proven to be the right bandage for the hole that we're all carrying.
And then we'll close out with one question, if that's okay. In the front row, I saw a hand.
In the first chapter, I cried and I laughed. And one of the things that hit me the most is when the grandfather gives the speech in Guatemala. The rest of the guys say, I'm not going with him. He's the family.
Yeah.
I have 3 grandkids. Still hit me when I think about how the sacrifice of parents to send a kid. I mean, it's great. You know, the sacrifice that we were blessed that we come here. Now we have peace. I put to book. This is what they want. My kids they can respect the immigrants. You know, sometimes the American life comes to them and they forget.
Yeah.
And I don't want them to forget.
Yeah. Gracias. Gracias. Gracias.
So thank you, Javier. Thank you, Beyond Baroque. I believe we have books in the bookstore, and there will also be a signing.
Yeah.
All right. Drive safe, everyone. And thanks again, Javier. I appreciate
Gracias.
it.